Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm back with you with another video and it's a studio beauty photo shoot using the Canon EOS R. I used it for the first time in the studio and I'm very excited to share with you what I found out about it. But before we get into this video, please make sure you subscribe to my channel and click the little bell button to not miss any of my future uploads. Okay, so as I mentioned, this was my first time using the Canon EOS R in the studio situation. I tested it a day prior on a fashion shoot and I was happy with the images, but I wasn't necessarily too happy with the camera. It wasn't really anything technical about the camera, it was just the feel that I was getting. It felt kind of plastic and I didn't really love it, but I decided to give it another chance and test it out in the studio and see how it goes. You know, I was using Sony in the studio before and I was pretty impressed with it, so I wanted to see how the Canon compares, especially in terms of focus. You know, when I shoot in the studio, it's usually a low light situation before the flash, so I wanted to see how the focus manages with that and so on. So in this particular shoot, I tested out the Canon EOS R with the 180mm Canon lens, that is a macro lens, and I used a little adapter to put it onto the camera because, as you guys probably know, the Canon EOS R only comes with 2 different lenses, I believe, and the rest needs to be adapted from the full Canon camera range. So I used that and I was very interested to see how it goes as well because I never used that lens before. I did want to try something that was a bit longer because usually I use my 100mm 2.8 macro, which I really love. So I just really wanted to test out the 180, see how it performs and so on. Okay, so my studio setup for this shoot was just one single light. It was the Profoto D1 500 Air. I used it with a 6-foot softbox. I usually don't use softboxes, I prefer to use umbrellas, but in this particular case the studio didn't have an umbrella that was big enough, so I settled for that and I was happy with it. It usually gives you a nice soft light, especially when the diffuser is so big. I also used 2 black boards on each side of the model just to make sure that I preserved some of the shadows because the source of light was so big and soft. I still wanted a bit more contrast in my images, and that kind of ensured that the sides of her face were a bit darker than the rest of her face, so it wasn't too flat. For my light setup as well, I put it up to maybe 5'11", 6 feet high, which is around 180 centimeters. I tilted it down tiny bit, maybe at like 45-degree angle. She was probably 1.5 meters away from the light and then probably 2 or 3 meters away from the background. It was quite a big studio, so we had quite a lot of space to play around with, which was nice. The light was set up at around half power throughout the shoot. I did adjust it slightly. I think it was at between, I think the max is 8 and I shot around 5.5 to 6, so maybe a bit more than half a power, but anyway. The model was also sitting down, which means she wasn't at an eye level with the light, she was slightly below it, but because the light was tilted at 45 degrees, it kind of covered the area of her face quite well. I rested her hands on the stool because I find it's a bit more comfortable for a model to be resting kind of forward like that, because then there's more comfort in using her hands in the shoot, especially if it's like a close-up macro shoot. I also used a white table just to not have any reflection or any kind of, you know, shots of the actual stool. We later changed it on because the stool that she was using was a bit too short, so we had to find something that was a bit taller, and the one that we found was brown, but I was cropping most of the shots kind of very, very close, just below the neck, so it was fine. For the majority of the shots, I just wanted something really nice and simple. The makeup was really beautiful and glowy. It was just super simple. It was 3 looks. It was a red lip. I think we adjusted a tiny bit in terms of colors. We went a bit crazy towards the end, and by crazy I mean with a colorful eyeliner, but overall I find the shots, the beauty shots that work very well for me are usually the simplest ones. Usually, you know, minimal makeup, super glowy skin, beautiful bronzy kind of look, and that usually performs really well. Our model Christina had a beautiful freckles. She has beautiful skin, so it was a real pleasure to shoot with her. It was just really nice and effortless. She's a great model as well, so she knew how to pose her hands. I asked her to do a variety of poses. I've put the poses with the hands because it helped kind of, you know, break up the shots a tiny bit and make them look a bit different. So it helped keeping the images slightly different from each other and not just, you know, all kind of straight head shots, because it's kind of tricky when you do beauty shoots. You can get stuck in just doing head portraits. As I mentioned before, it was my first time using the Canon 180 3.5 macro lens, and I have to say I found it really nice to work with. I had to be a bit further away from the model because if I came too close it wouldn't focus properly, but in general I really enjoyed shooting with it. It was a very similar experience to shooting with the 100mm, but I find with the 100mm there's still a tiny bit of distortion when it comes to face, and with the 180 it was just very nice, and the frame was filled in with her face much better. So I really enjoyed that, especially for some of the macro shots. I found it filled up the frame a bit better, so it just kind of made it a bit easier for me to frame the shots and just kind of make it look nice. As about the focusing on my camera, because it was the first time I was using the Canon EOS R inside, it was mostly really good. I was using the IAF and I found it very efficient. It was super fast. I did find that with some of the macro shots that were super close, the camera tended to pick the nose more than the eye, which was kind of irritating. I did struggle with it quite a bit, and I had to, you know, kind of click on the camera where I wanted it to focus. But because I was hand holding, I wasn't using a tripod, it was quite a heavy task because the lens is absolutely massive. Even though the camera itself is quite light, I think it's 660 grams by itself comparing to my Canon, which is almost a kilogram. But with the lens, it was very bulky, and trying to hold it with one hand and then pick the focus on the other hand was just very tiring. But you know, you can use a tripod, so it's not really a big deal. I was using a mix of live view and a viewfinder. They both worked pretty efficiently. I know that some people said that sometimes when you use live view, the focus can lag a bit more, that it's faster to use the focus when you're doing a viewfinder. So I totally take that on board. But in general, I was very happy with the focus. When I was looking at the photos afterwards, they had really good detail. Most of the photos, I think 98% of the photos were super sharp. So I was really happy with the results. The color grading on the images was so easy to do. As with all the other Canon cameras, the colors were really nice, so I didn't have to worry about it. The skin tones were really accurate. I'm going to show you some of my close-up shots so you can see the insane amount of detail you get with the camera. So the camera is a 30 megapixel resolution, same as the Canon 5D Mark IV that I usually use, and it's a full frame as well, and the amount of detail that you get is absolutely insane. You will see on the screen how much detail you can see. You can see every single eyelash, and with the focusing system being way better than the Canon 5D Mark IV in my opinion, it was a very powerful setup, I find, for beauty. I did enjoy using it. As I said, the focusing was an issue from time to time with the macro, but at the end of the day, even if it was showing that it was out of focus, when I was taking the photo, it was actually in focus. So whichever way the camera worked, it did work. I think all in all, it's a very good camera. It compares pretty well with the Sony a7 III, although I still think I prefer the a7 III. They're both at similar price points, around $2,000. I think what annoys me with the Canon EOS R is the fact that it doesn't have a wide variety of lenses that are dedicated to this camera. You have to use an adapter, which, you know, is not the end of the world. As I said, the lens work pretty efficiently, but it's just an extra piece of equipment that you have to carry with you, and I think it would be better if they came up with a fuller range of lenses if they were releasing the camera in the first place. But you know, I will take it. As I said, I was pretty happy with the 180mm. I think it gave me a great look. I definitely recommend you guys test it out if you're doing beauty, especially macro beauty. I think it was a very interesting experience comparing to my usual 100mm, and I would definitely consider using it again in my future beauty shoots. It gave me a beautiful amount of detail. I was getting beautiful sharpness throughout the skin. I was really happy with my light setup as well because it was very soft, but I was getting those nice highlights, and because of the black boards, I was getting the nice shadows as well. Overall, it was a very good shooting experience, so I would definitely recommend that you guys test out the setup. Even if you don't have the EOS R, I would you know, urge you to test out the 180mm because it was a really nice experience shooting with that lens. Even though, as I said, it's a bit heavy, so I could have probably used a tripod. I just don't really like using tripods normally because they're quite bulky and heavy, and it just adds extra hassle to try and move the camera and so on. But other than that, I was really happy with the results. You can see the befores and afters, you can see the raw images. I think they came out pretty well. And yeah, all in all, great shoot. I definitely recommend you guys test out the setup. Okay guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next Sunday.